Hey, beautiful people. This is Aisha with Life, Love, and Lessons. And I wanted to do something a little bit different because I do a lot of talking about adults and adult issues. And um, I think that it would be a disservice being a mom, being an educator, being a therapist, being a human being, to not talk more about children. And as of late, there have been a lot of things that have been going on, and kind of like, I guess you could say, like the underground media that have been bringing to attention a lot of things that have been going on, for, probably ages. But I think that now a lot of stuff is coming to the light as all things in the dark do. And so I think that there are certain things that we participate in that put our children at a disadvantage. And so I want to talk about just a couple of things today. I just want to just say that this conversation is going to probably be a little graphic. So if there are young listeners around, I would just be very careful with their listening and their participation. This is really for one mom speaking to another mom, another dad, another auntie, whatever it is. But basically, this is an adult conversation, but it is about children. Um, I started off by, I was going to write this piece that was entitled Disservices That We Do to Our Kids. And so today I'm going to talk about two things that, some of us participate in that I think are part of the fundamentals of safety when it comes to our children. And it shouldn't be neglected. And so I'm just going to read a few things and then I'm going to go into a little bit more of a discussion. But just be forewarned that some of it is a little bit, it is adult content. So it's called Disservices We Do to Our Kids. Let's grow together. We all know parenting comes with no guidebook, but doesn't excuse second looks. We can observe and become more aware of the services we do to our kids, some of which we may have shared in our own childhoods. But why not break generational curses for our children's well-being? This list is not exhaustive, to say the least, but a springboard from which to guide. Can we please stop forcing our babies to kiss and hug people, whether they are relative or not? Our children have an innate ability, an instinctual ability. When they don't vibe out with certain people or certain situations, we need to take heed to those kind of things. I think that as a society, a lot of us have life, right? Because life colors everything. But I think a lot of times what happens is we're all born with innate abilities. I think that what happens is in the world, through experiences, through, us pushing or striving for certain things, whether it's our parents that are doing this, the people that are around us, the environments that we're born into or grow up in, they color certain things, but they also can color things in a negative or positive way, right? And so I think one of the things that we tend to lose are our instincts. And kids have this naturally, and we all have this. It's about tapping into it. But when you have a child and they are uncomfortable or they are adamant about not wanting to give somebody a kiss or a hug or even being around certain people, they pick up very well on energies because they're pure vessels. They have nothing to really block them from wanting to be pure and pick up on what's going on. So when you have a child that is around somebody and they're constantly crying or they cringe up or they're uncomfortable or they're saying things to you that is, in their own little way that they're trying to express their discomfort because they don't have maybe the words to identify what it is that they're feeling, but they're feeling something from their gut, something from their instincts is screaming out to them. This person may not be right. I think it's important that we give our children the power to choose. And of course, at the end of the day, they're children. So we are the ones that have to choose for them. but we are the ones that have more of the awareness, and we have our jobs to do as far as our children are concerned. I'm big on ownership. I think that one of the first, steps in us having any type of effective change is ownership, is identification, identifying what an issue is or what a problem may be. And I see this time and time again where we are forcing our kids to go against the grain of their beings. And sometimes some things just don't make sense to us, or somebody else is like, well, why you don't want to hug your auntie, or why you don't want to go to your brother, or why this and that. We need to let our children have ownership over themselves to a certain degree. Because I think when we force our kids to go against their instincts, they become tainted. And then they become tainted adults that go against their instincts. I learned when I was, let me see, probably a young adult, just how important it is to go with your instincts. This was a huge life lesson for me. My grandfather had gotten really sick and he was in the hospital. And me and my grandmother were at the hospital. Me and my mom, my family, we all were taking turns going to stay with my grandfather in the hospital, because at a certain point he went into the rehab portion of the hospital. And in that, we had to be vigilant over him, because, as a lot of when you have loved ones in hospitals or nursing homes or whatever, you have to be vigilant. There are good people, good medical providers, nurses and doctors, but there's some people out in this world that are just not nice. And so we were being vigilant over him. And this one day I came early, it was in the morning. My grandmother was already there. And the doctors had came to us and they said that my grandfather was bleeding out from somewhere, but they didn't know where. And that he needed a blood transfusion. So, my mom called to check in because she was at work. And, I told her, I said, listen, they're saying that grandpa needs a blood transfusion. This is what's going on, kind of thing. So she said, well, do you think I need to come off the job and, see what's going on and stuff? I said, well, no, I mean, they made it sound like it was pretty routine. I think that, he'll be fine. But as I'm talking to my mom, something within me was saying, tell her to come. And I still to this day don't know why I went against that inner voice that said to me, tell your mom to come here. I didn't know why that voice even came, but I went against it. And so he was to have the blood transfusion, and just a turn of events. Like, I started noticing, like, my grandfather was just talking. Like, he's, like, looking up in the far off corner of the room, and he's talking to people, and he wasn't looking at me or no my grandmother. And I'm like, who's he talking to? And I'm listening to names of people that he's naming, and I'm like, none of these names sound familiar except for my uncle, which is his son. And he's talking to his son, and he's saying these things, and I'm in my mind, I'm like, oh no, I think something bad is about to happen. And as he's talking, his eyes kind of veer off, and I'm looking at him, and I see his eyes glass over, and it was almost like his eyes just went black, and he died in that moment. And of course, he coded, and the team ran in. They ushered us out the room to do CPR on him, but I had known that it was fruitless because he was already gone. And in that moment, I was so sad and mad and hurt, more so that I missed the opportunity to tell my mom to be there for her dad in his last moments. And it's still a hard thing for me to think about, because I feel like I almost cheated her out of those moments with her dad, because I went against my own instincts. And it's crazy because this is like way over 10 years ago. This is a long time ago, but I think that we all have instincts. We all have an inner voice that tells us something, and our children have that as well. And when we go against the grain of that, when we go against that feeling, sometimes it can be detrimental. It could be life and death. That feeling, that voice, that trigger, that everything is there for a reason. This is divinity. You know, whatever it is that you believe in, whatever you call him, her, whatever, the bottom line is that it exists. And we are designed, divinely designed, and one of the greatest strengths that we have is our own instincts. And so from that day forward, I promised myself that whenever I heard that little voice, whenever I felt an inkling about something, whenever something didn't sit well with my spirit, it was for a reason, and it was something that needed to be attended to. And I say all of this to say that we have to get back in touch with ourselves, but we have to be committed to keeping our children in touch with themselves. It's not a coincidence that we're designed to do that. But it's also not a coincidence that we lose some of that. And I'm here to say, let's not lose that, and let's help our children to not lose that, so that they can stay pure vessels, so that they can be protected in the most natural ways. I think the other thing, and I'm just going to move on to the next disservice that I think we do, is about our own discomfort sometimes with talking about things like private parts. It was funny. I had a conversation with a group of adults. This was maybe like a year ago. And a young lady was talking about her son and the discomfort. And this is not a judgment, because I know that this is, I think that sometimes I am a little bit different in my level of comfortability. Like, I'm comfortable talking about any and everything, but some people are not. So this is by no means a judgment, but I think that one of the disservices that we do for our children is to not call things what they are biologically or scientifically. We need to stop being afraid of using words that are the actual words. Why are we afraid to say penis and vagina? That is a part of your anatomy. It's no different than an arm or a leg. You're not embarrassed to talk about an armpit or a leg or an elbow or an ankle. Why are we embarrassed to talk about a penis or a vagina? Part of our makeup. We do a disservice to our children when we don't name things as is, because I'm going to tell you what happens. There was a little girl who was talking about her uncle. And she was saying that her uncle kept going to her pocketbook. And nobody picked up on what it is that she was trying to tell people. Because whoever, I don't know, but somebody said that somebody taught her to use the word pocketbook instead of vagina. And her uncle was going in her vagina, not her pocketbook. And this baby could have been saved from abuse had she had the words to express what was going on. It was overlooked. Now, finally, somebody caught on to it. Like, what do you mean he's going in your pocketbook? And then they figured it out. And this child was taken out of that situation. But imagine how that could have been prevented. Or even if it happened and it could have been prevented from continuously happening, because clearly it had happened more than one time, because she said he kept going in her pocketbook. So we got to get comfortable. And even if you're not comfortable, it's a disservice to call things not as they are. How many times can things be overlooked or dismissed? If you hear kids talking about cookies, which just sounds so, casual and nonchalant. But if you told your kid that their vagina or their penis or even their behind, their anus is, a cookie, and they're talking about cookies and what's happening to the cookie, and we're not even picking up on it because the word cookie is not ringing any alarms for anybody. we do a disservice by not calling things as they are. So no matter how uncomfortable you are, we need to have these conversations with our children. We need to let our children know that this is their body and they have ownership of their bodies. And this is the other thing, you know, and this is something that, you know, people get real funny about. But the reality of the situation is that we all have a body. You want to explore your body. You should explore your body, even as a child. And people might think this is, weird or whatever. But the bottom line is the only way that you can get to ownership and understanding your body is exploring it sometimes. And children do it, whether we like it or not. They'll look at themselves in the mirror, they'll touch themselves, and there's nothing wrong with it. Now, there's a such thing as privacy. If you have a teenager and they, masturbate or whatever, all right, you do that in your room, you do that in the shower, but that's your private business. You know what I mean? And even if you see a child participating in something like that and they're exploring themselves, there's certain things that you can, help them to um make sure that they understand that it is a healthy and a natural part of life, but there's an appropriateness to it. You don't want to see your kid touching themselves and they're sitting in the living room watching cartoons or whatever. But I think it's important that we give our kids the tools. That's what we're here for. We have to allot them the opportunity to be equipped with tools, and not only to get the tools in hand, but also how to use those tools, to use them effectively, to use them safely. And that's part of our job as parents, as educators, as caregivers. So that's part of our job. And people might not agree with me as far as touching yourself situation, and that's fine. But I think that we have to get a little bit more open with our thinking, and even more open with even examining why we are uncomfortable with certain things. How many adults that I know that are uncomfortable with, and your sexuality develops in childhood and pre-adolescence. So why are we not promoting healthy thoughts and behaviors in childhood? And if you're uncomfortable, if you feel like it's a sin to